These things out. All right. Are we ready?
We're ready.
All right. Actually, I don't need this. You can start it over. Sorry. All right, let's go. Hello, everyone. My name is Klumpenhower. Welcome to my TED Talk. So happy all of you are here. And I'm going to be talking about my research question. Should have tested it, shouldn't I?
Towards the computer.
Towards the computer.
Bottom button.
Bottom button.
Bottom button. There we go. There we go. In World War II, was the Allies' victory in Europe more due to Allies' strategic superiority or blatant Axis error? Now, I know what you're thinking. First and foremost, history is boring. I understand that. All right, you know, it's not everyone's thing. It happens to be my thing, but it's not everyone's thing. So, in an effort to try to spice things up, I'm going to be representing major players and armies in World War II with emojis. So, sort of just to give you an idea of what's going on. So America will be represented by this money bag right here. And England will be appropriately, I think, this little guard. Germany is represented by this lovely pint. And France, as always, will be a white flag. So, just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here, let's jump on to the first topic. Hitler, starting out with a doozy. This is Hitler's emoji. When we're talking about strategic superiority, you know, that ultimately boils down to Hitler, right? He's the guy making all the decisions as far as the Nazis are concerned. However, Hitler was not a great strategic guy, and we saw that play out in World War II, as I'll detail later. What he was very good at was controlling a population. That's how he gained control of Germany, by using a plea to emotion. He would use definitely not logical arguments, but more arguments of what the people wanted to hear. Since Germany was currently going through a big economic crisis, you know, their money was literally worthless. They were burning it for fuel. It was that worthless. So Hitler offered, he said, I'm going to get you out of this, and I'm also going to give you someone to blame for this. And because people really, really like having something not be their fault. So he chose to blame it on the Jews, as is widely known. So that was one example of his emotional pleas. Another would be his use of fear. Once he had power, he pretty much controlled it by using the Gestapo, which is the German secret police, as long as several other organizations to keep rival political parties in check. Now, fear works great when we're talking about a civilian population with families and livelihoods, but not as well against military forces, as we'll see later. So, first major gaffe. We got Dunkirk. Great movie, by the way. Let's jump right in. So, right here we have the French city of Dunkirk with the smaller city of Calais right here. This is mainland France. We got the English Channel and England over here with the coasts of Dover. So there's a combined British, French, and Dutch Belgian force, mostly stationed in Dunkirk. They're up against the wall, you know, and there's a small division over in Calais that's gotten separated over the course of this war. They need to get back here. Unfortunately, that's going to be a little problem for them because the Germans are here. So they're not doing so well, are they? So the Germans have been steadily moving forward ever since the beginning of the war. They're finally up against the English Channel, and they just keep on moving in. This army is about to be destroyed. Well, that's not a good thing, right? So, Winston Churchill over here comes up with a plan. He decides to send this little Calais division in to attack the Germans in an effort to buy time. You know, hopefully they'll stall them a bit or something. It was a last-ditch hope. It's an absolute suicide mission for these guys. But surprisingly enough, it actually worked. Hitler decided that it was more important to draw divisions from over here to extinguish this one division very quickly and not continue on to destroy the larger force, which is stupid. It allowed some boats to get over from England to carry all these guys back. The German force arrives on the beaches of Dunkirk. There's no one there. Just about, or not just about all of the troops, but the vast majority of the soldiers made it back to England. So, major implications of this. This was a huge moral victory, if not an actual strategic one, since it still was a retreat. But this was the first sign of Germany slowing down in the war to date. This is the first time they'd actually managed to fail at a goal of theirs. And morale skyrocketed around the UK for the majority, but also, you know, France, other allied countries, because they thought the war was over, pretty much. But they pulled it out and with some stupidity from old mate Adolf. And at that point, really, the Germans never really caught up the steam that they had originally. They never quite got their momentum back. So, moving on to Operation Barbarossa, proudly sponsored by Enemy at the Gates. Buy it on DVD now. Another good movie. This is the German invasion of Russia. So, here's the Russian border. It's a bit crude. Oh, that's the wrong button. So, it's a bit crude, but the Russians are based somewhere around there. There they are. Here's Stalin. And here we have the German force, which is a smaller force, but a better trained one. They're better armed, and actually it turned out a superior force. So this operation started in June of 1941. By September, they're around here. They're steadily moving through Russia, which is hard going, but they're steadily progressing. They're not getting slowed down. You know, around November, they're around here. But here's the problem. They kind of need to be here by November, because, as everyone knows, it's not the best idea to attack Russia in the winter, and when December hit, bang, snow. Ruined everything for the Germans. Like, tanks froze up, like, the whole troops went down. Kind of created a stalemate that way, which is not what the Germans want, because their whole strategy was based off quickness. Now, Germany could have avoided this, as we'll go on here. One thing, so, first of all, Germany was actually at peace with Russia prior to this happening. They'd actually signed a treaty prior to World War II saying, essentially, hey, don't mess with us, and you can take half of Poland when we're done. And Russia's like, okay, sure, we like half of Poland. So they were at peace. There was no reason for them to attack. Russia was not going to attack them. Second off, all of Germany's air force, or at least the vast majority, was involved in the Blitz, bombing London and other big British cities, so they were unable to fight in this conflict, which slowed down the attack. If Hitler had simply waited until the Blitz had ended, or if he had invaded Britain and conquered them first and then been able to use his planes, they probably would have made it to Moscow by December. And the worst thing about this probably was a result of these two, that it ended up making the Germans fight a war on two fronts, because it created this new enemy of Russia in the east that wasn't previously there, and once England and France and eventually the US got their footing, it created two fronts, so they had to devote their troops to two different areas as opposed to one, which is bad. You don't want to do that, as evidenced here. They lost. Let's move on. Now we're going to go to an example of probably less Allied stupidity, or Nazi stupidity, and more Allied being smart. However, there's still a certain aspect of stupidity here, and it's pretty fun. It's a fun story. Operation Mincemeat starts off here. June 1943, U.S. is in the war at this point. See the right here with some British and French from their posts in Tunisia. The Allies had a large portion of northern Africa conquered from battles in 1942 that I won't really get into for the sake of time. So right now, they want to get rid of Italy, because Italy is Germany's main ally in Europe. And, you know, if you can get rid of an ally, you know, that's a big thing. You want to do that. And also it'll provide that two-fronted war that they're trying to get, because the Western Front hadn't been created yet. So, where do you think you'd go if you were going to attack Italy, if your forces are here?
Sicily.
Yeah, it probably makes sense to go to Sicily, right? That's what people were thinking. I mean, you know, you could like go around over to Greece, you know, and then up through that way. But that doesn't really make sense. It's kind of roundabout, right? That doesn't make sense. And it's like a longer boat travel, and that's bad. Storms, you never know. The Mediterranean's wild. So this is really the best option, right? Well, the Germans knew that too, so their forces deployment looks something like this. These are Italians. So the Germans, the Axis knows this, right? So their troops are mostly here. They're not really worried about Greece. They're not worried. They're worried about this force, as they should be. So it's the Allies' job to convince the Germans that they're not going to be attacking in the only logical place it makes sense for them to attack. Well, how'd they do that? Well, that's why you're here, isn't it? So, this is the plan that they came up with. There's a bunch of really smart British people. One of them was Ewan Montagu, who's the guy who wrote the book that was on the cover earlier, if you noticed. Another one was Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond novels. He didn't play that big a role, but it's a cool fact. So their plan was to come up with a secret plan, which was called Operation Husky, which went through Greece, which is the dumb plan, right? And that plan, and to deliver that plan, you know, into Hitler's DMs here, they decided to deliver it via a dead body. So this is where it gets fun, because you can't just like give it to them, right? Obviously, and you have to make it discreet if you're giving them false information. Otherwise, they'll sniff it out, right? They're not idiots, or at least most of them aren't. So you have to disguise it somehow. So they planted it on this body that they obtained semi-legally from a London mortuary. And the body had to have all kinds of specifications because they needed to imply drowning with this. They were going to stage, like, oh no, a plane blew up, this guy parachuted down into the ocean, and then he eventually drowned and washed ashore. So they couldn't just have any death, right? They had to have a death of a guy in like his 20s to 30s who died of something whose symptoms didn't contradict drowning. And also, he had to have died sometime like a week ago. So, fortunately, London's a big city. They find a guy, and they, again, to try to make it more, stop laughing, it's serious. To make it more believable, they decide to assign him a fake personality, and all these other things make sense. He's given the rank of Major William Martin, name completely made up, rank completely made up. The rank had to be high enough that he'd have access to this kind of sensitive information, but not so high that the Germans hadn't heard of him, right? Because otherwise they're going to be suspicious, like, why haven't we heard of this guy if he's so important? They put all kinds of stuff in his wallet. They put, like, play tickets and letters to his fake girlfriend, who's based on a real person, and letters from his dad, and slips from his bank saying that his balance was not doing so well. So try to give him a bit of personality. So once they came up with this guy, they got a submarine and they dropped him off the coast of Spain in Huelva, right around here, and they allowed the tidal currents to push him ashore to Spain. Spain at the time is a kind of ally of the Axis. It's a fascist state, even though it's not directly allied to the Axis. They're kind of friends, and they know that if they drop a body there with sensitive Allied information, the Spaniards would pass it on. They also know that there's a German Abwehr, which is their equivalent of the CIA office, located in Huelva as well, where we get to these guys. So, first Nazi official is Karl Erich Kuhlenthal. That's a fun one. And he, for lack of a better word, he was an idiot. He's a bit of a loony. He's one of those guys. Have you ever met someone that, like, thinks they're really, really smart, but really isn't? Have you ever met someone like that? That's Kuhlenthal. He thought he was all that, and when this body showed up, he's like, oh, this is my big break to Hitler. And he rushed through the autopsy with some Spanish doctors who pointed out that, hey, things don't quite add up, but he's like, no, be quiet, this is my thing, and passed it on to our next friend, Alexis Baron von Rohen. Rohen did not like Hitler at all. Rohen was very patriotic to Germany, but not to the National Socialist Party. He was actually, in 1944, became part of the famous Colonel von Stauffenberg plot to kill Hitler, and was eventually executed for that. But at this point, he was really high up on Hitler's list. Like, he was one of his top officials and advisors. So Hitler trusted what this guy said. So Alexis gets this body with all the information, and he notices something's odd. There's a play ticket in there that's dated later than when the autopsy said he died. Well, that's a problem. What does he do then, Alexis? He says, oh, well, I think it's pretty good. We'll send it on over to you, Hitler. There's a very good chance he knew exactly what was up and just passed it on because he didn't care, and he was trying to undermine the Nazis. He's a good guy. So he sends this on to Hitler, and Hitler loves it. Hitler again, making decisions more emotionally than logically much of the time, loves the thought that he has gotten ahead of the Allies here. And he immediately decides, okay, we're going to go into action. All those troops we had there, we're going to move them here, over to Greece, because Operation Husky is going to be here. See, they have this force. They have this invasion force. So all these troops that were here got stationed over here, along with a bunch of tank panzer divisions, which actually came off the front lines of Operation Barbarossa, which also influenced the war there, funnily enough. And then the Allied forces were easily able to go across to Sicily. Even easier than expected, I might add, because the defending force of mostly Italians put up an even more Italian performance than usual. And so its casualties going into this invasion were expected to be at around 80%, which is pretty high, but not unreasonably high. They were 20%. And the Allies kind of just marched up through Italy from there, established this second front, and eventually went together and defeated Hitler. So, when we go back to my original question of who was more to blame, was it the Allies being smart or the Nazis being dumb? Well, it's a bit of a combination of both, because yes, Hitler made a bunch of mistakes, and they were big mistakes. Dunkirk might have single-handedly won the war for the Allies itself. But the Allies also did what they could to capitalize on those mistakes. And without that, if they'd been lackadaisical or hadn't used their intelligence as well as they did, they could have lost the war anyway from one of these other blunders. And when I was thinking about this, I realized, that kind of sounds obvious that that's how the Allies won, right? Because winning in most things, be it war or chess or football, it's all about taking advantage of your opponent's mistakes. And it's a relatively simple conclusion to something that seems more complex. Anyway, that's my TED Talk. Thank you.